Welcome to Your Need to Know. I'm your host, Catherine Reed, and today I'm talking with Ellen Graham of Cameron's Coffee and Chocolates. Welcome, Ellen.
Thank you, Catherine.
So let's talk a little bit about what makes Cameron's Coffee and Chocolates unique. You and Jim Graham, who I happen to know fairly well, since he's my cousin, so I've known both of you for a long time, but you two started this business for a very specific reason. So why don't you give us a little bit of background on the genesis of Cameron's Coffee and Chocolates?
I'd be delighted. So we have a daughter, Cameron, who when she was 22 years old was about to age out of the Fairfax County public school system, and we started looking for jobs for her. And she's very social and very capable, and we just did not find a match that suited her. And so we decided that we would start a small coffee and chocolate shop, and we naively thought, how hard can it be?
Well, you know, Jim had owned a small business previously. Your
Yes.
background is banking and finance. You have an MBA, right? So
I do.
Business people. But, you know, in starting a business for people who are in the intellectual and developmentally disabled community is a challenge because she had been through the Davis Center at Marshall High School, correct?
That is correct.
So young people who are in the IDD community, people who are on the autism spectrum like Cameron, are going through public education with all of their peer group. They're getting skills like through the Culinary Center. They get out of school, and where are the jobs?
Right. And I think that it goes back farther than that. You know, Cameron, when she was young, when she went to play soccer, we didn't only have her play Special Olympics. We had her play community soccer. We had her be part of the team. Whenever possible, we tried to include her in the larger community. And that's what her life was. And so at Davis, although she wasn't part of it, was more sheltered in terms of specific work skills and not
Right.
being part of the larger community, she always had the expectation that she would not be in a traditional sheltered workshop, that she would work with the public.
Right, and more now, so she's a millennial.
She is.
She and Evan, my son Evan, are about the same age. But young people now are being mainstreamed almost entirely all the way through from kindergarten. And
That's
so
true.
we're cumulatively educating young people in the IDD community to have these expectations that they're part of the larger community.
Both for the IDD community and also the DD community, people with developmental delays, all of our children grow up with the expectation of being part of the larger community. And having those expectations placed on them when they graduate from school or from training programs, they have the same expectations, not only the individual, but their families, that there's going to be an opportunity for them to become productive members of society, where they're paid, where they do meaningful work, and where there are expectations placed on them.
So not having found that for Cameron, and she did work. As I recall, she worked at the Giant in McLean
That's correct.
for a number of years. 6 years, right?
6 years.
But she was capable of so much more than that. And to your point, we need to put every person in a job where they can develop their skills to the maximum of their potential, right?
I think that's absolutely true. And I have to say that Giant was a wonderful employer for her. They gave her the opportunity to run the self-checkout lanes, to help people when they got stuck. It was just an expanding expectation for her, and she loved every minute of her time there. When you are an individual with an intellectual disability and you're placed in a work environment, as wonderful as Giant was, she was working in isolation. So when she went on break, she didn't have any friends to hang out with. She was alone. And cashiers were nice to her, and other people who worked at Giant were nice to her. But it's not the same as having coworkers.
Right.
And the other thing is that our community is a vulnerable community. And so when you work with the public, there need to be a couple of protections that just guard against people taking advantage of the vulnerabilities that exist.
So that brings up another aspect of employing people in this particular community, and that is job coaches. And so from the minute you started Cameron's Coffee and Chocolates, which was October 1st of 2013, you're coming up on your 5-year anniversary, which is amazing to me. It was not just having the young people who are employed there, but they do need supports. So explain a little bit about the role of job coaches.
So the job coaches are critical for us. And I would start by saying that our job coaches are very different than a traditional job coach. In a traditional job coach, so I'll use the example of when Cameron started at Giant. The job coach would stand back and tell her what to do. So, okay, you need to bag that separately, or if it's glass, you need to put that in another bag. But the job coach never worked alongside her. She just strictly gave instruction. For Cameron and for others, being in a cooperative environment is so much more productive. It's more productive because the job coach then can model appropriate behavior, both in terms of work process and in terms of response to unexpected events, just overall be a role model for anyone that's working in the kitchen at the same time. Along with that, job coaches typically want to work with our community and want to be a part of it. And so we need job coaches that are job coaches for this generation,
right,
and not for the past, because they're very different.
Right, and boomers still rule the world, which is why I think there's this gap that employers haven't realized because they're of our generation. We're boomers, right? We did not grow up alongside people in this community in our school system. Younger people have, and so younger people have accepted that there are people of all kinds of differing abilities in their classrooms, on their sports team, on their college campus, in a restaurant. It's just they accept the fact that people are different.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right.
So the boomers have not created. So to me, this is the problem that needs to be solved. How do we get the people who create jobs, manage jobs, own companies to recognize there's this eager, skilled workforce that needs an opportunity?
Right, and I think a lot of times it's exposure. The more exposure you have to our community and seeing all the wonderful things that they can do, it changes your impression. And then for employers, it makes them more willing to take that risk. For an employer, it is a risk because at first, they don't know what they're signing up for. But our workers are reliable in terms of coming to work on time, taking pride in and responsibility for the jobs they're assigned, and that's given the opportunity. They're just amazing workers.
Absolutely, and they get so much more out of it than a paycheck. Although I remember famously in an interview, Cameron's, I think it was Tommy McFly, who said, "What is the best part about working at Cameron's?" And Cameron was like, "The paycheck." And because that gives you these young people understand that you need money. Money is what makes the world go round. That's how you live, that's how you buy things, but they also want coworker relationships, to your point. That's the other thing.
Well, that's right. It's being part of a larger community. And so that means job coaches. That means we also hire high school and college students to work in our kitchen. And so it's a cooperative environment. And so in our kitchen, we don't have one person doing dishes all day long. Our rule is if you dirty a dish, you clean it. And so that way, everyone takes responsibility for their actions, for all of their actions, not just the dishes.
So explain some of the jobs that you have at Cameron's. And you've expanded recently, so you've employed even more than your original smaller group.
Right. Well, 5 years ago, we started with 3. We now have 20. Wow. So that's an amazing growth over 5 years.
Yes, it is.
And initially, we started with a couple baked goods. And today, we make cookies, and we make muffins, and we make cupcakes, and we make brownies, and we make wraps, and we make quiches. And so when you talk about the jobs that my workers do, they do everything I just listed. They hand dip chocolates, and when they're just starting out, they start with marsh pops or caramels. And the ones who've been with us for a while, dip our truffles, which are so hard to do. They don't let me dip them, but
I remember back when you used to do that job. I used to watch through the window as you're carefully trying. It is hard.
It's very difficult. And so, given time and opportunity and expectation, I think that people who are part of our community can just amaze others with their skill sets.
And the great thing about this too is that people can come and look at your workforce. One of the things you've done at Cameron's Coffee and Chocolates is you've got glass windows, so people can actually see into the kitchen, right?
Well, I never wanted our workers to be shut off from the community that shops with us, from our customers, and from other people who come and go. And so you're right, there are windows all around the shop, both in the kitchen and both in the chocolate room. And there's no door leading to the kitchen. It's open. And so we want to be a totally inclusive environment.
And I think that's important too, because it gives confidence to your workers and people who come in to get and I'm going to encourage everybody to come into Cameron's Coffee and Chocolates to get I always get my large non-fat latte. That's what I get. But to come in and it just experience the entire environment, right? Because it's open to the public. It's a business.
That's right. It's a real life business, and we do catering. So, we're going to be in the 4th of July parade in the city, so we participate in lots of outdoor activities. Next week we're going blueberry picking. The blueberries are supposed to be excellent right now, and we turn it into jam. Again, my workers do all the work that's related to that, and so yeah.
So, and I will say this about the different kinds of things that they do, that makes it interesting for them too. Then when they go and pick strawberries or they go pick blueberries and they turn it into jam, that that's a seasonal thing. So it's not necessarily the same fixed routine.
Never.
You're trying to give them different experiences, which if people follow the Facebook page, they can actually see photos of some of the things that your workers are doing.
Well, and along with that, I think that by having no set thing, we're a real life business. So we might get an order to cater a large lunch. Well, then that means everybody that the day before or 2 days before, we're all working on that lunch. And then, a week later, we might be doing a totally different event where it's all chocolates, and then we have to dip and package all those chocolates. So no 2 days are ever the same in our shop.
And some of it really is seasonal, because chocolates, because of warm weather, you don't have as many chocolate events like in the warm weather months. But starting in, it's Halloween, it's Thanksgiving, it's Christmas, it's Valentine's Day, the Chocolate Lovers Festival, Easter, St. Patrick's Day. These are kind of all things that involve chocolate. And so doing jams in the summertime makes sense, that you kind of shift gears a little bit.
Well, and what I didn't realize until we started this business is 95% of all chocolate sales occur between Halloween and Mother's Day.
Wow.
Right?
That's good to know if you own a business.
And so that's for us. We did know that right when we started it. And so we thought, well, what are we going to do in the summertime? And that's when jams came up. And they've been wonderful, because during that holiday season, when people want tons and tons of chocolates, they also want to send lots of gifts. And so when they're traveling someplace for Thanksgiving, they can bring, a box that has 3 of our jams in it.
That's so great. And when we come back from our break, we're going to talk further with Ellen Graham of Cameron's Coffee and Chocolates about this particular workforce that they have built their business around.
Maria, so how's work?
It was 4th period biology. Our students just weren't getting how easily viruses spread. So Miss Bell and I had them role play a zombie virus outbreak. By the time they had all learned the lesson, all the living were dead. Hey, how's your job going?
That big sales meeting I planned? Next year, I might get to go.
Cool.
Welcome back to Your Need to Know. Today I'm talking with Ellen Graham of Cameron's Coffee and Chocolates in Fairfax City. This business employs the intellectually and developmentally delayed community, also referred to as the IDD community. So, Ellen, we were talking about the fact you started the business 5 years ago, but you didn't just wake up one day and decide you had a business model that would work. You and Jim actually did a fair amount of research trying to figure out what the right business would be.
We did. We are both fairly analytic people, and so we decided that we would go around and look at different models that existed at that point 5 years ago, employing our community. And so we started looking in Richmond. There's a business called Daylight Donuts. They make donuts and they run a coffee shop similar to ours. But they have, they sell to companies who, for company meetings, they bring in donuts and provide it to other organizations. And then in Charlottesville, there's Breadworks, and Breadworks runs a bakery similar to ours, but they make breads, and they have contracts with both restaurants and hotels.
Wow. Big.
Right, yes. And so every model that we looked at, we kind of took away different pieces. There's another business in Richmond called Positive Vibes Cafe that runs a training center and runs a business, a catering business. And with them, the gentleman who started that said to me, when he was talking to me, he said, "Don't ever think that because someone supports your mission, they don't expect your product to be superior because of who's made it."
You know, and I remember Jim talking about that too. It has to be excellent. People might come in because they support the mission, but nobody's going to have a substandard muffin in order to support a mission.
Right. So we went into this with the idea that we didn't have to be as good as everyone else. We had to be better.
Right.
And so that's why we bake fresh from scratch every day. That's why we only use Belgian chocolate. And that's why we try to maintain very high quality standards.
And it is. And everything about it is spot on, because obviously I give a lot of gifts, buy a lot of chocolates, and also for events like when we do fundraisers, we actually have Camerons do cookies or desserts or whatever. And people need to think in terms of the fact that you do corporate catering and you do event catering, because looking at the outside of the shop wouldn't necessarily tell you that inside those doors you are capable of scaling in a very large way.
That's exactly right. And for us, when we looked at those different models, we weren't happy with an exact fit. And that's when a friend mentioned a chocolate shop on Martha's Vineyard called Chillmark Chocolates. And for the women who were there, they had started the business at that point 25 years ago, so now it's 30 years. And they just wanted to change people's lives. And they've spent their lives doing it. And for them, we fell in love with their model. We fell in love because it was a cooperative model. It was a model of parallel work, and it was a model with expectations. And so when we came back home, we decided, okay, Chillmark Chocolates is what we want to copy in terms of our mindset. Now, they don't do baked goods, they only do chocolates. And for us, we needed something that was going to go year-round.
Right, and the fact that your coffee shop, unlike a bakery or a place where there might not be as much interaction between the workers and the public, you really have opened up the shop so that the public is interacting. And again, with the glass windows, everybody feels like they're in the same space together, which I love that about Camerons.
Thank you. Yes.
So if other businesses wanted to be more committed to an inclusive workforce, what would that look like? And let's go back to the fact that you serve on a workforce development board here in Fairfax County. And you were asked to be on that board because you have very significant, specific experience. What would we have to do if we were going to ask Northern Virginia companies to consider this eager, skilled workforce?
Well, I think that if we had job coaches, and those job coaches were trained, and that's one of the challenges that I find, is finding people who are job coaches that are really trained for my model, that model of cooperative parallel work versus a traditional model where a job coach stands back and just gives direction. And those people, what would they look like? I think that they would probably be really any age. You could have someone, a college student, all the way through someone who's retired. I think that the most important thing is somebody who wants to work with our community. The other thing that's critical is a person who's not going to rescue someone with challenges.
Right.
but instead has expectations for them and is willing to let them struggle a little to reach their goals.
I think you're absolutely right. And I see the community colleges as being part of this because we've got 23 community colleges throughout the Commonwealth of Virginia. And I know the Workforce Development Board also has someone from Northern Virginia Community College. And so when you talk about certification programs for lots of other health techs or, cybersecurity, this could be a place where a curriculum could be set up for job coaches to do the coaching part of it, right? Like specific skills. And you have a lot of experience in that because you've been working with job coaches for 5 years.
Right. And so you're absolutely right. I mean, there are certain things that they could get a certification in terms of both the way to address individuals, kind of respecting their basic human rights, things to do in terms of motivation. I mean, it seems to me that it could be a very clear-cut path to someone for employment in terms of just having the knowledge of how to best handle issues that might come up in a busy commercial kitchen or really in any work environment. You could take the same thing if you had a job coach and you were in an office setting and you had a job coach that supervised 4 workers. Maybe one of the workers could be doing the filing and someone else could be doing data entry. Our workers have wide ranges of skills and abilities. And some of them, given the ability to do something like data entry, might be the most productive worker you've ever seen as an employer. But you have to give them the opportunity. And having that job coach there to be the person that interfaces with the workers, keeping them on schedule, giving them breaks when needed, helping them if something arises that's out of the ordinary, that would be the ticket to furthering our workers' employment in outside businesses.
And I think you make an important point too, is that you can't hire one person and one job coach. You need to hire a cohort. You need to have a group so that they have coworker relationships with people in their community. So if a business wants to be committed to a more inclusive workforce, it's not about getting one person and saying we have one person doing a job in our company. It'd have to be, we're going to commit to hiring 4 people and a job coach and structure it so that they understand how their cohort fits into the larger community of the workplace.
That's exactly right. But then again, once somebody was willing to do that, there's full inclusion.
There is, and and once people get to this expectation that people are capable of doing all kinds of jobs and have all kinds of skills, we take away the kind of the exceptional nature of the fact that we've hired people from the IDD community. Well, when you understand that people have skills that you want and you want to employ people who have the best skills for the job, it no longer becomes exceptional. You just hire the people.
That's exactly right.
And I think to your point too, there is a vulnerability when you only have one person and they don't feel like they're connected to the larger workforce, and because you don't want social isolation.
No, well, you want somebody who, when they're on break, they have somebody else that plays Special Olympics, so they have a frame of reference.
Right.
Right. You want a job coach that understands that there are things that these workers want to do outside of work and want to be able to discuss it with their friends and find ways to organize it. And that shouldn't be the responsibility of the employer. If the employer has decided that they're going to employ our workforce and expand the opportunities within their company, then what we need is a job coach to facilitate that.
Right. And I think the other thing that we need to look at too is the role of families in placing, especially the younger workers, in the right job opportunity, because there's so few job opportunities right now. Families are like, well, here's an opening and it looks like you'd fit here and so you should do this job. But these young people don't see it that. They're like any young people. They want to have some sense of self-determination.
Well, and I do. I have had parents come in and say, oh, I'd love for my son or daughter to work in your coffee shop. And my first response is, well, would your son or daughter like to work in our coffee shop? How do they feel about this? Do they, at home, do they want to be in the kitchen? Now, I know my daughter's crazy, but she'll work all day in the kitchen at the shop, and then she'll go home and make a batch of cookies.
She loves it. I know. She loves doing it.
That?
Yeah.
And so, but for our young adults, even though they have these challenges, it doesn't mean that they don't have likes and dislikes just like everyone else. And I don't know if you've been in a commercial kitchen, but when the convection oven's going and the fan that takes all the air out of the kitchen and the dishes are clanging, it's a very noisy place. So for some people, that's not the right environment. In spite of the fact that they're capable of doing the work, if it's bombarding their sensory system, then they need to look at other opportunities.
Right, and so those other opportunities need to exist, and there needs to be a tremendous variety. And I think too, we talk about workforce readiness in the school to workplace. You know, a lot of high schools are looking at, not everybody's going to go to college, they're going to go directly into the workforce. But if that's the case, then we really need to be putting a lot of energy into how do we work with high schools to create this pathway from programs to the workplace for this particular community.
Absolutely, absolutely. And if you did that, if you had a certification process, it would increase the pool. Because right now, that pool is very low. And our community is growing, it's not shrinking.
You know, and I'm aware of that, and I just wonder how many employers are aware that just because you can't see the workforce, I can look in a kindergarten classroom or in an elementary school and tell you in 15 years how exponentially larger it's going to be.
Absolutely.
And we have to have a place to put these young people who want to work and who have skills and have abilities and have expectations and dreams of a life for themselves. And so I feel a sense of urgency that if we don't start now, there are going to be so few jobs and so many people who want them that it doesn't serve anyone. It doesn't serve anyone's purposes.
Well, and right now, so many people, when they graduate from the training centers, are not going to employment. They're at home.
And that's just a crime, really, it is.
Well, for all of us, isn't a big part of our sense of who we are what we do every day?
Meaningful work.
Right.
To know that what we do is valued and has meaning to us and meaning to someone else, which is why the paycheck is so important too.
Well, not only the paycheck for my workers, it's having somebody walk in the door, buy a muffin, and for that worker to know, oh, I made that muffin.
That's right, the pride of ownership. Well, thank you so much, Ellen. This has been such an illuminating conversation. I hope we have inspired people to think about what they can do in their own workplaces. So think about where you work, think about what opportunities might exist in your company, your small business, your retail business, and how you can convince someone to make a commitment to a more inclusive workforce here in Northern Virginia. And that is what you need to know.